Pokemon Legends ZA is super neat, even if we don't know exactly when it's based yet, but probably when Paris demolished and rebuilt its entire inner city at the same time Legends Arceus happens to be based in. It was a whole, Parisian redevelopment plan, just like the trailer says for Lumiose. Video here on that. But one thing I loved about the last Legends game was the Hisuian variants of the starters, and now if I were to come up with ideas for new ones for this game, what would I do? It's gotta become super French the same way the Hisuian mon became super Japanese, and well, first off, which starter Pokemon would be chosen? Well, going off of Hisui as a template, you don't get the starters from the region the game is based in, though that could change if Legends ZA is in a more modern setting, so you just get the modern starters, and maybe they have new Mega Evolutions, but that's boring, in my opinion. Unless, I think the best of both worlds would be getting new starters with regional variants, but you can also catch the native starters in the wild just like you could do in Hisui, but this time around, those native starters get Mega Evolutions. That'd be neat. But back on topic, cross out the Gen 6 mon. You probably also won't get any of the Gen 1 Pokemon because they just overshadow the other two, like, hey kids, in this game you can have Charizard! Or two other Pokemon, but who cares, because you can have Charizard! To cross them out, we also probably won't get any starters from the most recent generation since we, just had them. Though I do like this idea for Quaxly. Quaxly is already a little Navy sailor boy and a duck. The French love eating duck. It evolves and is now super serious about ballet, which France is also extremely into. Super serious about all kinds of arts, really. And then it normally becomes a super flamboyant samba dancing duck thing as Quaquaval. But what if it went the opposite route? What if it got even more serious and reverts back to its military navy theming? Yes, a Quaquaval that is a musketeer. Famous French warriors utilizing many French inventions. It's a fun idea, but not one we can dwell on. Let's see. Honestly, the easy route would be for them to just use Snivy and Piplup, as their final evolutions are already French. They just have to slightly French fry him up a bit more. Make Empoleon even more Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, maybe water dark type now. And Serperior could get even more snobby. Maybe it's a toxic grass poison type. It's like prickly rose plant, since the French were all about their rose gardens. And I guess that's kind of what they did with Samurott. Samurott was already a samurai, so they just made it more samurai-y. They made it reference a specific samurai, Nobunaga, famous Japanese samurai warlord. So I guess I wouldn't be surprised if they just did that, but I'd still be disappointed. But who would the third be in this case? Well, without thinking about it too much, my gut reaction tells me Litten. Stray cats were a big thing in old-timey Paris, so much so that there's a movie about it. How would you Frenchify Incineroar, though? Well, how about a grenadier, or bombs, or a cannon? The French invented plenty of cannons and explosives, and Incineroar's fur tufts already look like the results of little explosions. Heck, maybe Incineroar becomes the guy who shoots out of a cannon at a circus. Circuses were invented right next door in England, and they did indeed get popular in Paris, too. Maybe Incineroar could become like a proper firefighting type now. But nah, honestly, this trio feels a bit too easy. Let's go over some other free ideas you can make Mon out of, though, before we get to the real ones, like Scorbunny. France is also very big on football, or soccer. And though the game's rules were invented next door in England, the Frenchies loved it so much they made FIFA. Yeah, the FIFA, and turned the sport into the international sensation it is today. Not sure how to change Cinderace, though. Maybe fire dark type and it's a wiener who pretends to be hurt all the time to get sympathy, and then it strikes. Or maybe it's fire electric, like many thought Cinderace would be originally. And in this case, it applies that attribute to batteries, because the French made all kinds of advancements in battery technology. Maybe Chimchar, an Infernape that's fire ghost type. Fun history, the French actually publicly executed a chimpanzee via hanging because they thought it was a spy. So the Infernape is like that chimp back from the dead, wanting revenge. Poplio. Again, France was big into its ballet and singing and opera and the arts, and they even invented the metronome. You could easily give Primarina Marie Antoinette's hair also. Maybe make it a cabaret singer instead of opera. It's water something. A Torterra who's rock type now and has a nice manicured hedge garden on its back. Perhaps the shell resembles the mini turtle statues found around various mansions and palaces in France. And while Pokemon would never make a cigarette Pokemon, Trico famously always had a stick in its mouth like one, and the French famously were super into smoking. It was seen as fancy. A grass poison type Sceptile with Le Cigarette or Une Pipe would be funny. But for a more serious subtile idea, France actually invented a lot when it came to writing. They invented the modern pencil, and the pencil sharpener, and the mechanical pencil sharpener, the paper machine, and the stapler too. They also invented Braille, so I could definitely see, like, a septile wielding a big stick to mark things with. Actually, a Rillaboom could do that too. Charcoal-tipped sticks for writing instead of drumsticks. Grass psychic type now because of how intelligent it is, able to read and write. It's inherently very scientific, like many intelligent gorillas in media. Yeah, those are cool, but those are just little ideas I came up with along the way. Now let's get to our real three. I worked with Geodude, who's super cool and great at art, and these are the Mon we came up with. Let's start with our water type, Sobble. Sobble is a little baby chameleon who sobs and cries a lot, though it can hide invisibly when in the water, so that's nice. Then as a Drizzile, it is a sad emo teen, but then finally as an Inteleon, it is an intelligence-gathering James Bond reference. Famous British super spy with his many spy gadgets and abilities, including the ability to be very suave and confident in every action he takes. Very fitting of Galore, so now, let's French fry it. Catherine de Medici is one of France's most famous and influential royals. Born Italian, she married into French royalty and became Queen of France in 1547 during the French Renaissance. She was immaculately influential and powerful in her ways, so much so that when her sons and even grandsons became king, the whole era was still referred to as the Age of Catherine de Medici. But why and how was she so powerful? Well, let's just say there's a reason why, even in English, we use the French word espionage to refer to what spies do. She's the reason the trope of spies being French or phantom thieves is a thing. Catherine had over 300 personal spies she sent across Europe and the world, and she was a member of many secret societies, the kind that nobles, royals, and influential merchants, military leaders, and religious figures would attend while masquerading. And it was at these events she would flex her influence. Thanks to her spy network, she had dirt on everybody. "Oh, sir, influential baron, I know all about your dirty little secret. You'd best do me this favor before I hang your dirty laundry for all to see. Oh, sir, millionaire curator of art, you should definitely hire some of my men to secure your national museum."
What? No, we're totally fine.
Oh, really? Oh my. It would be a shame if something happened to your works of art. And under a week later, the place is robbed. Look at her smug aura in Civilization 6. She knows what she can get away with. It's no wonder she's often called the most important woman in Europe in the 16th century. However, she doesn't know what tomorrow will bring, and that terrified her to no end. The secret societies she was a part of were not just gatherings of the rich and powerful, they were gatherings of practitioners of the occult. Catherine famously was frequently visited by astrologers and the clairvoyant, and eventually she learned their arts to practice herself. She was occasionally accused of witchcraft and sorcery, though the accusers tended to disappear. Many even believe that she was the original creator of the Black Mass ritual, a blasphemous and unholy inversion of the Catholic Mass. So, an occult controller of an entire network of spies, huh? That can work with Inteleon. Heck, let's give our Kalosian Inteleon this Pokédex entry. A rarely seen form of Inteleon, though it was said a past queen of Kalos had them in the hundreds. This is Kalosian Inteleon, a water ghost-type French phantom thief and classical spy trope. Rather than the cape that can turn into a glider, this Inteleon has a full cloak where it secretly keeps an arsenal of moisture and souls. The first part of its dex entry reads, "Keeping a network of souls in its cloak allows it to accurately control several bubbles at once." It's like how shady phantom thieves will reach into their cloaks and pull out tricky attacks like floor spikes or explosives and toss them at the hero giving chase. This Inteleon can reach into its cloak and pull out sopping wet souls to attach to its fistful of bubbles and throw them at pursuers. And thanks to the soul control, the bubbles never miss. And that's its signature move, Bubble Swarm, but it's not the only new spy gadget it's got. It's got some ghost powers now. It is ghost type for the same reason Decidueye is ghost type. It is not itself a ghost, but it has a connection to spirits and some ghostly abilities. This Inteleon is able to subtly move objects spectrally like a poltergeist, so it can open doors and lift small objects without leaving behind any fingerprints at all. Not even a trace of glove, since nothing physical is touched whatsoever. And as long as it sticks to the dark shadows, it can blend in perfectly, like a ghost. It's also sort of like an invisibility cloak, but it only works in the dark. But thankfully, it can more easily hide in small dark corners than its Galarian counterpart, as it is less tall and lanky. Now notice the big bubble in its hand. That's its crystal bubble. It is just a bubble, but it functions like a crystal ball, those used by fortune tellers and spirit mediums to both see into the future and speak to the dead. But what does Inteleon see? Well, it sees through its bubble cams. In reality, bubble cameras are children's toys that resemble cameras but blow bubbles instead of take pictures, and I mean, spy gadgets already make for very popular children's toys, so that connection works. Bubble cam is also a slang term for those black dome CCTV cameras, the ones you see in retail stores, watching your every move. Maybe. You see, the dome is there so you can't tell where the camera's currently looking. But no, Inteleon's bubble cams are much more interesting than that. Notice the line under Inteleon's eye. That's its tear duct. And as a callback to Sobble, who sobs all the time, this Inteleon learned a way to turn its tears into tools. Oh, it's not crying. It's scrying. To scry is to see through a crystal ball. And here's how Inteleon makes it work. Using the water bubble from its finger, it swipes it along the tear duct to apply some supernatural eye properties. The bubble itself now functions as a scrying eye. It's a bubble camera able to be hidden or planted in and around any location dozens of times over, like tiny little spy cameras. They are constantly feeding subtle information to Inteleon, and at any point Inteleon can look into its crystal bubble to more clearly see what the bubble cam sees. This makes heists and spy work a breeze for Kalosian Inteleon, and since it always has a few of these following itself, them being controlled by souls to follow closely behind, it is impossible to sneak up on a Kalosian Inteleon, leading us to its signature ability, aptly named Scrying Bubbles. This ability raises its evasiveness by one stage each turn, as it makes more and more bubble cams throughout the fight. Now, to counteract that potentially being an overpowered ability, you could say Kalosian Inteleon is low HP and defense. It has to stay small and relies on its ghost abilities to do the heavy lifting in its job, so there's not much opportunity for it to grow those stats. But still, I love this, and would be so pleased with this idea, and that is our water type, so now, let's talk fire. You know what's really fire? Today's sponsor.
Beds. We all sleep in them, even if we find ourselves waking up on the sidewalk after passing out from a long marathon of Pokemon Go. That bit of ground? Well, that was your bed. And maybe when you wake up from the dirt, you'll realize something. You slept better than you did on your mattress back home. That old piece of junk, giving you back problems and non-restful sleep. It makes you grouchy. Bad sleep impacts every bit of your life.
Get well rested and you'll notice your overall quality of life improving along with your sleep.
The words of your favorite YouTuber Lockstin echo through your head. He was always talking about how much he loved his Helix mattress even after years and years of use, and how they have some kind of quick and easy sleep quiz you and a partner can take, and they would recommend a certain mattress to you based on your needs. It was amazing. And best of all, he always had a deal for us. And I could have just gone to helixsleep.com/Lockstin and gotten 20% off and 2 free pillows, but I never did. And now I'm just an old grouch, and it's too late.
Except I'm not dead yet, so you still have time. My wife, Kat, and I still sleep so much better every night since we got the Helix Midnight Lux. Oh, there's a comma after wife there? I promise they are separate entities. It's the mattress with my favorite part, the cooling cover, to help us dissipate our excess body heat. But no matter which mattress you order, it comes vacuum sealed in a box, and they have a 100-night sleep trial to make sure you love it, and a 10-year warranty too, so there's really nothing to fear about giving them a shot. So for your rest's sake, you probably should. Link below. Before it's too late. So hey, if you've ever done that super common thing where you walk up to somebody on the street and say, "Quick, what is France most famous for?" They're probably going to say something like the Revolution, the Eiffel Tower, Napoleon, or chefs and cooking. Yes, it may be a bit of an easy idea, but yes, cooking. Looking at French food from a historical standpoint, they basically created the modern standard of Western cooking. Of course, they didn't do it alone, but they made the foundation, especially in a more refined culinary arts sense. This is why chef characters in a lot of media tend to be French, or at least French-coded. Well, that and Julia Child, who was essentially the first TV hostess of an educational cooking show, and her whole deal was making French cooking specifically accessible to Americans. Bon appetit! She gave the impression that French cooking was the pinnacle of cuisine, but really, you can do it at home too. But still, French food being the pinnacle is an idea that slowly bled into American-made media, which in turn further reinforced the trope. And what animal is often depicted as food-obsessed and/or a cook or chef? That's right! Swine! And France loves their pork, and are second only to Spain in pork production in Europe. So, here comes Tepig, who becomes Pig Knight, who becomes Kalosian Embor. Oh! Look at his happy face! You'd have no idea this guy was a total sadist. Sadism is the tendency to derive pleasure from inflicting pain and suffering on others. And yes, that is the angle we're going with. French chefs famously invented and utilized all kinds of cooking techniques that are widely considered to be cruel and unusual. Now, originally in this script, I wrote out the descriptions of just a few examples of cruel dishes and practices, but I decided, you can just look them up if you really want to know, because like boiling crabs and lobsters alive, that is the mildest thing that they popularized. On the other end of the spectrum, there's practices so inhumane that tradition dictates that in order to consume these dishes, you first have to get a napkin, blessed by a priest, and then you wear that napkin on your head when eating the food in order to hide your sin from God, who can't see through napkins now, I guess. To skip over the details, let's purposefully torture birds for weeks to make their meat taste different, and let's also drown them slowly in brandy instead of killing them with some humane method, like just chopping their heads off. Like, we're the French, we love chopping heads off, but we don't do that to the birds, no. We have to purposefully prolong their suffering, and brandy burns! France is considered second only to China in terms of countries doing cruel and unusual things to animals on purpose in order to change how they taste. And conveniently, original Embor is based on a Chinese myth, so the connection just works. Now, all that said, you really could say that this Embor is fire dark type, and maybe for balancing's sake, it could change to that. But no, it's not. The real type will be revealed soon, but for now, I mean, its favorite thing to do pulls from its Pig Knight roots as a wrestler. Kalosian Embor grapples others in a tight embrace, like a nice warm hug, and then it turns the heat up from its arms and belly, cooking whatever poor thing is in its arms. And it keeps the cooking slow as the victim squirms and pushes and tries to escape. The Embor smiles. He takes pleasure in their pain and their feeble attempts at getting away. Sounds dark, yes, but this is not the face of a dark type. No, this Embor is fire fairy. European fairy tales, many of which are French, famously are much crueler in their original writings than in whatever rated G Disney movies and children's books show. They frequently feature gruesome mutilations and plenty of children cooking. And that's not children cooking for others, that is cooking the children, boiling them alive in a cauldron because, their suffering makes the soup taste better. Witches, fairies, and fey creatures all have a trickstery side to them, and oftentimes they do some pretty messed up tricks. And in a sort of snobby restaurant waiter and Hatterene crossover, this Embor takes etiquette to an extreme. It will not hesitate to attack those who do not use the salad fork for the salad, the fish fork for the fish, the meat fork for the meat, and don't you even dare touch the dessert fork. It must stay perfectly parallel to the dessert spoon until it is time to use it, lest you insult the chef, who is this Embor. And honestly, who may be purposefully trying to make you mess up. Tee-hee, a nice little trick. It's pretty twisted, like the tail of a pig. Singing French table etiquette is the stupidest thing. And I just mentioned drowning birds in booze. So, okay, that's the inspiration. Now how's it applied here visually? Well, the ornate Chinese patterning on Embor's belly now looks and functions like a stovetop, especially of the more old-fashioned variety, perfect for pressing its prey into. Sear the skin to a crisp, seal in the flavor. The screams make it a delicacy. The fire around its neck now resembles a chef's neckerchief. Chefs wear those to help keep them stay cool in a hot kitchen. But Embor's is actually fire, so I doubt it helps in that regard. The tail now serves multiple functions. It's a spatula, it's a pizza paddle, and it can wag around to fan the flames under an oven. And it can slap you. It likes to stick its tongue out and wink because it's fun and playful and happy, and when it's preparing an attack, smoke rises from its head and nose to resemble a chef's hat and moustache, particularly of the French variety. Chef hats have that iconic shape to help the chef stay cool, and that could be the case here, actually. Embor is burning away the excess heat in and on its body when attacking so it doesn't overheat. Roasted Farfetch'd, anyone? No? It looks too fatty because it was force-fed macarons for days before being roasted? You don't want Kalosian Embor's cooking? Oh, watch out. It might just use its signature move on you. Searing Embrace is a physical, fairy-type move that both causes a burn and the bound status, which is what moves like Bind and Wrap do, slowly dealing a little bit of damage over time and making it impossible to swap out your Pokemon. The victim is trapped in that big boar hug, right against the flaming hot stove, ablaze with fairy fire. Truly, it is cruel. So why is this Embor still so joyful? Well that's thanks to Joie de Vivre, its signature ability. Joie de Vivre is a very big part of French culture, and it's a saying both in France and abroad. Like in the US and England, you would still use the French term Joie de Vivre, though probably mispronounce it like I am. Joie de vivre is why Paris is the city of love and full of nightlife and parties and countless cafes to spend your lunch breaks in. It's why the French people are so into their paid leave and workers' rights and short working hours and relaxation and lunch breaks and rights. Joie de vivre means to simply delight in living your life. Oh, how wonderful life is. This Embor is always cheery and in a good mood, always just doing what it loves, enjoying life. By making others suffer, but still, it's enjoying life. It's in such a good mood that its special stats cannot be lowered. Its special defense is quite high thanks to its mental fortitude, though offensively it's more so a physical attacker, so doesn't get too much benefit from that. Sous vide Pikachu, anyone? Magikarp sashimi? How about a cuff egregious soup? French nobles did want to eat mummies at one point because they are just that messed up. Moving on now, it's time to talk grass. So another thing of note about the Pokemon chosen for the Hisuian starters is that you can break down the generations into 3 eras, and then one of the 3 Pokemon is from each of the 3 eras. Rowlet is modern, Cyndaquil is classic, and Oshawott is in the middle. Now for us, we've got our modern Sobble, our middle Tepig, and so it's early Gen time. Issue though, we don't want to touch Gen 1 as they would overshadow the other 2, and we also don't want to use the Trico line because it's also quite upright and lizardy just like the Inteleon line, and we could use Turtwig, but we're already using an adjacent gen, so we're kinda just stuck with Chikorita. I know, right? I'm sorry, but okay, we can make it work, and make it work well. Let's go further back into French history, to the High Middle Ages. France, or rather the Franks at this point, because they're a bunch of wieners, is at the top of their game once again. Let's talk royal steeds, or rather seeds, since it's a plant. France's royal knights and paladins set the example for how we see medieval knights today. Full plate armor, big swords and lances, and their horses were covered in armor too. And if media is anything to go off of, they were often followed by squires and really annoying bards. Actually, do you know what horse armor is called? It's called barding. And heck, you know where our modern bard tropes come from? Yes, the French from the high medieval period. Though they were called troubadours at the time, they were poets and singers who wrote songs about love, romance, and heroics with flowery, rosy language. Their tales even started the whole knight in shining armor saving a princess and then they fall in love trope. And even the many stories about nobles falling in love with non-nobles and then marrying said loved one for love, instead of marrying into a prearranged marriage for a family alliance or something political. They started these themes that still echo into our stories today. And really, what symbolizes love more than a flower? And here's another fun fact. This part of the horse armor, this one right here where Meganium's flower would be if Meganium was a horse, that's called a petrol. That sounds a lot like petal, like flower petals. Petrol, right? The Meganium line is all about their nice smells and aromas that have varying effects. For instance, bay leaf scent from its neck makes you feel energetic, perhaps like a heroic bit of music from your party's bard giving you buffs in battle. And then normal Meganium scent calms you down. It makes you feel pleasant, like romance or a calming tune from a bard. Music soothes the soul and the savage beast, after all. So yes, let's take Meganium and make it work perfectly as a knight's loyal steed and their bard at the same time. A bard with barding. This is the grass steel type Kalosian Meganium. Pokédex, a rare form of Meganium today, they were once commonly rode upon 1,000 years ago. The minerals in their diets go straight into a latticework of moss-like protofeathers that become as tough as iron. Plants of all kinds utilize minerals to get tougher and function, of course, but this is a whole new extreme. The extra weight means they're not the fastest, but they are defensive walls. When not being hit by fire, that is. And their huge roots let them heal mid-battle quite efficiently. Oh yeah, those two huge spikes on the sides of it, those are like the aerial roots that many plants produce. They are like regular roots, except they're not underground, they're in the air. But let's back up a bit. Regular old Meganium, it's a generic sauropod. And we wanted to add on some elements from armored and French dinosaurs, and lo and behold, France and the area around it have found a whole bunch of Stegosauruses, including the Miragaia. Notice the particularly long neck for a stegosaur. See how the tail and rump feature spikes, and then further up they become the full plates you're probably used to. And what's this? 2 giant spikes coming from the shoulder blades? Nice. We could say all these spikes probably evolved from bay leaf's pointy leaves. Now, looking at the whole Chikorita line in the anime, this spot is also where their vines come from. And compared to most other grass types in the anime, this line uses their vines constantly for way more than just vine whip. They are mightily important to them. And in the case of Kalosian Meganium, they became so well exercised that they grew and grew over generations until they lost the ability to fully retract them, hence them sticking out so much. In exchange, though, they are no longer just vines, they gained aerial root abilities. So thick and pointy and long, and thanks to that it can release them and thrust them forward like a large jousting lance. And that's not its only utility. These holes here serve 2 purposes. Firstly, they function a bit like the end of a straw or an elephant trunk. They stick that aerial root vine in the water and tasty. But it can also have air go through it, and it functions a bit like a flute or the pipe of a bagpipe. Remember, this Meganium is musical. Here it is inflating its throat sac too, making a tune. The square plates on its upper back can depress and change the notes of its tune like a trumpet, fitting as that's where sauropods' air sacs are. A few sauropods are even speculated to have had inflatable bits along their necks for making loud calls and or as a mating display. How romantic. dinosaur lust. But as such, this Meganium can learn numerous song-based moves like Sing, Perish Song, Alluring and Disarming Voice, and more. It's a bard with barding after all, and let's look at more of that barding now. The petrol is a rosy red to further emphasize its flowery origins. In fact, many species of rose feature green stems with deep red thorns, just like the spikes on its tail. And plus, roses symbolize love more than any other flower, and are extremely emblematic of French-styled gardens. And making roses out of steel is a whole work of craftsmanship too. The armor along its back is akin to the caparison part of horse armor, the blankets that are often adorned with royal seals and symbols for ceremonies and events, like jousting tournaments. And actually, when the Stegosaurus was first discovered, scientists believed that the plates on its back were down, acting like shingles on a roof, protecting the spine of the dino. So functionally now, just like this armor on Meganium. And up on the neck, we have the Creenet, simply neck and head armor for horses. The extra antenna or stamen on this Meganium is in reference to the feather plumes and flags often adorning the horse armor here. And all of this armor gives it the battle armor ability, which prevents critical hits. But for a signature move, we've got Leech Lance. Imagine Giga Drain, but a physical attack, and slightly better. This is the move where Meganium whips out those roots and shoots them forward like a jousting lance. Upon striking the enemy, it absorbs a bit of their life force to heal itself. Given that Kalosian Meganium's attack stats are on the lower side, this attack heals 75% of the damage dealt, rather than Giga Drain's 50, just to balance it out and make it a little bit better. And maybe we could do a fancy and make it like Flying Press, where it's both grass and steel type, depending on which one does more damage. So, a dinosaur steed bard with barding from medieval France, a sadistically French chef pig from more recent times, and a supernatural spy lizard from the French Renaissance. As a trio, I think they work decently well. You got very varying body types, personalities, and stat distributions. Their type triangle isn't exactly balanced. Poor Meganium. But most starter trios aren't. And also, that doesn't really matter in a Legends game anyway, I feel. But what do you think of these ideas? What would you change? I know that these are incredibly unlikely when the easy route of Empoleon and Superior exists, but a guy can dream. This is what I would do. What would you do? Let me know down in the comments, and never—
Home, home, we all the way home.